There's a version of this story where I'm running. That's the one I told for years. I spent most of my life feeling like something was chasing me, and all I could see in front of me was a room with no way to get out. See, when I was a little girl, I kept having the same strange type of dreams. I kept dreaming with snakes going up my back while asleep in bed. I found myself also having profound dreams about not knowing my own identity. Like I dreamed that I was diving far deep into the ocean to try and find my ID card. There were just so many indicators in my dreams that lead me to realize I was lost and did not know who I was. And these other cards I saw in my dreams with pictures on them, I'd never seen anywhere in my waking life. I didn't find out until years later that they were tarot cards. I was dreaming them before I even knew they existed. And I think about that a lot because it tells me something true about you, too. Some part of you knows things before your mind has words for them. The stuff that comes to you in dreams. The things you can't explain to yourself or anyone else, for that matter. That's not random. It's not you losing your grip. It's older than you and me. You didn't make it up. You remembered it. I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, at 10 past 1 in the morning in 1976, the year of the fire dragon. The old traditions say if you're born in a fire dragon year, you're kind of built to burn. And boy, was I stubborn in what I thought and believed as a kid. Yeah, perhaps a little too much. And the dragon in almost every culture is really just the serpent grown huge. Same power, same fire. But nobody ever tells you what happens to a fire when it's got nowhere to belong. I was born on an island, and at 3 months old, I was brought to the States. My mom wanted to go to see my father and introduce me to him. My folks were not together then. So, I grew up without a dad, and without a home that stayed home. We moved and moved again, a new address before the last one ever meant anything. And here's the part that still gives me chills. In my birth chart, Saturn sits at the very last degree of Cancer. Saturn is the planet that stands for your father, for structure, for the walls that are supposed to hold you. And Cancer is the sign of home, of mother. Astrologers call that last degree the degree of fate. And because I was born in the middle of the night, Saturn also happens to be the hardest planet working against me in my whole chart. So you've got the toughest planet, at the most fated degree, sitting right in the house of family. That one little symbol basically says, no father, no roots. You're going to have to build your own foundation or go without one. And maybe yours says something too, something you've been carrying your whole life and never had a name for. A fire with nowhere to belong learns to make itself small. When I was 19, I moved to New York to pursue a career as a singer. I was so sure that was going to be my life, not knowing that desire for fame was my own need to be wanted and loved. But that door to become a famous star never opened. And that same year, on the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, I lost my older brother to a senseless act of violence. He was shot over 20 times and brought down by two men over tire rims that my brother had nothing to do with. I found out young, and the hard way, that life doesn't wait for you to be ready. Later, in my mid-20s, I had children and married the man I'd been working with on my music project. We had kids, bought a house, and then got married. And I'll be honest with you, it was never really a friendship. It was always more like a teacher and a student who'd forgotten she was her own person. I was very insecure, narrow-minded, and very naive. I was a people pleaser and scared to disappoint or make others uncomfortable or upset with me. And here's a detail people usually get backwards when I tell them. He wasn't working. For years, he stayed home with our kids. He continued to try and make his goal to become a well-known music producer still happen. And I was the one working, hardly getting time with my kids, but bringing home the money we needed to survive. And well, I was holding the whole thing up. I was so afraid to disturb my house of cards. which makes what happened to me inside that house even stranger. Because you'd think the person carrying it would have a voice in it. I was afraid of upsetting things, afraid of making decisions, and possibly even making him angry with me. I got smaller and smaller until I fit the little space I'd been taught by my upbringing to be grateful for. So, you want to know what that actually looked like? It looked like me going quiet. I stopped saying what I really thought because I didn't want the fight. I didn't want to be the problem. So we ran out of things to talk about. And the few times I did open up, when I tried to share the one thing that was finally coming alive in me, this spiritual path I was just starting to walk, he'd turn it into an argument about how wrong I was, that what I was experiencing in my interior life was an illusion. Think about what that does to a person. You start to believe your own inner life, and your mind is dangerous. You know what I mean? That the truest thing about you is the thing most likely to start a fight. So you swallow it, and you swallow it again, until one day you can't even remember the sound of your own voice. You can lose yourself inside a life that looks just fine from the outside. You learn to want less. You start calling the smallness peace. And the whole time that fire is still down there, just waiting. And then the question shows up. It always does, right when you're not ready for it. Isn't there more than this? I started searching like I was starving for it. I found meditation, and I found Kundalini. That coiled up fire, the old traditions say, lives at the base of your spine. And that snake I'd been dreaming about since I was a kid, it wasn't a dream anymore. It woke up. The fire started climbing, and it burned through everything I thought was holding me together. My nervous system felt rewired. That tight grip I had on who I thought I was just loosened, finger by finger. The alchemists actually had a word for this. They called it calcinatio. The very first step of the whole spiritual work, burning. Burning away everything you're not. And I need you to really hear me on this. It wasn't a metaphor. I felt it. It burned. But here's the thing. What burns in an awakening is never you. It's only the stuff that was never really you to begin with. I didn't understand what was happening to me. So I went looking for an explanation where I'd started. I went to the church. And I want you to notice something about that because I didn't notice it myself for years. I wasn't picking a religion off a shelf. I was born in Puerto Rico. Catholicism is the faith of that island, of my family, of the place I came from. When the fire hit and I got scared and went looking for somebody to explain it to me, I went home. I gave myself completely to it. The rituals, the prayers, all that structure I never had growing up. And then one day, kneeling right in the middle of it, I felt the exact same energy I'd felt in meditation. Exactly the same. It didn't care what name I was giving it. That was the moment the walls came down for me. I'd studied the roots of most of the world's religions by then, and all of a sudden I understood in my body what I'd only guessed at in my head. The fire doesn't care what temple you build around it. It doesn't care what you call it. It's the one thing burning underneath all of them. The same thing the mystics in every tradition were pointing at, just with different words. That's what as above, so below really means. It's not a bumper sticker. It's the same pattern running through every level of everything, including you. If you're feeling even a little of that heat right now, if some part of your life is starting to crack open and you don't know why, then you already know why you're here. This channel is a fire I keep lit for exactly this. For the people getting burned clean, whether they asked for it or not. Subscribe and walk the rest of this with me. Because what comes next is the part nobody warns you about. To follow that fire, I had to leave. I left on December 21st, 2014, the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. I didn't plan that. I want to be really clear. I didn't sit down with a calendar and pick a symbolic date. I just left. And it wasn't until years later that I looked back and saw what I'd done. My brother died on the summer solstice, the longest day. My son was born on the spring equinox. the day the light comes back, and I walked out of my children's home on the winter solstice, the darkest night there is, three of the biggest turns in my life, landing on three of the four hinges of the year. I can't explain that to you. I've stopped trying. I just don't believe anymore that we're standing outside the pattern watching it. I think we're in it. And leaving cost me almost everything. My marriage, the friends who couldn't come with me, I lost nearly all of them, not because anyone was cruel, but because they belonged to the life I was walking away from. And my children stayed in that house. I need to say that out loud, because it's the part I could easily leave out. And I'm not going to. I left my three kids with their father. He had a huge extended family around him. And I looked at what I could give them on my own, a woman in the middle of coming apart, with no family structure behind her, no roots, nothing steady. And I didn't believe I could match it. So I chose what I thought was the more stable home for them. And then I walked out into the longest night of the year, and I carried grief and hope in the same hand. And I honestly couldn't tell them apart. You want to know what I see now, looking at that chart? Saturn in the house of family, at the degree of fate. The kid who grew up with no father and no stable home turned around 30 years later and became the parent who left one. Same wound, other side of it, Saturn never gives you a painless option. It gives you a real one, with a real cost, and it makes you choose it with your eyes open. The alchemists had a name for this stage, the nigredo, the blackening, the falling apart that has to happen before anything new can be born, and this is the part the world completely forgot how to teach. Falling apart isn't your punishment, it's the process. You can't be rebuilt without first coming undone. The gold doesn't get added to you, it's what's left after everything fake gets burned off. So if you're in your own blackening right now, if everything's falling apart and none of it makes sense, I'm not going to tell you it's fine. I'm going to tell you it's working. There's a point in your birth chart called the North Node. It's basically the direction your soul came here to grow toward. Mine's in Scorpio, the sign of death and rebirth, of the shadow, of all the stuff we're taught to look away from. And it sits in the part of the chart that's about deeper wisdom. Seeking, teaching, right next to Uranus, the planet of sudden, out-of-nowhere awakening. Put it all together and it reads like one sentence. Go into the dark and teach what you find there. And get cracked open without warning so you actually do it. I didn't pick the name Rebirth in Alchemy. I recognized it. It was written over my head before I ever took a breath. And I spent 40 years walking toward a word that was already waiting for me. Your chart is saying something too. The only real question is whether you'll spend your whole life running from it, or finally turn around and become it. And then life wasn't done with me. Right when I'd completely made up my mind that love and motherhood were behind me, I had a baby. At 47, and the man he came with? Born on my exact birthday. A mirror I only found after I stopped looking for one. My oldest and my youngest are 20 years apart. The alchemists called this last stage the rubedo, the reddening, life coming back, the gold finally pulled up out of all that black. And it's not a prize for surviving the fire. It's the whole reason for the fire. You don't burn to be destroyed. You burn to be revealed. I'm living that part right now. And I promise you, the falling apart you're so afraid of is not the end of your story. It's the ground your gold is buried in. So that's why I told you all of this. Not so you'd know about my life, so you'd recognize your own. You're a fire too, one that maybe never got a place to belong. That snake is coiled up in you, right at the base of everything you haven't been willing to look at yet. And those dreams, those things you can't explain, that's not you going crazy. That's your map. Becoming yourself was never about turning into someone new. It's about remembering what you already knew. Before the world talked you out of it. The fire was always yours. It's just waiting for you to let it rise.